This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
They want to say, what about the surge? Well, first of all, just gut check, stop. Anyone who's using the term surge around you consciously is trying to invoke a militaristic frame. And that's a problem because this is not a surge. These are children and they are not insurgents and we are not being invaded, which, by the way, is a white supremacist idea, philosophy. The idea that if an other is coming in the population, that this is like an invasion of who we are.
The learned words of AOC. If anyone tries to tell you there's a surge at the border, they're talking about an invasion, and we're not being invaded. Well, we are being invaded, but not in the sense you might originally think, but we'll break it down. But she doesn't like the term surge because it suggests militants and insurrection. You're going to hear her get into that in more detail in a moment. But the woman needs to be schooled on the difference between the word surge and insurrection. I'm going to draw it down to a baseline. Let's begin there. As I said, you'll hear her use that term insurrection later as if that ties to surge. I'm not a professor of literature and English. I acknowledge that. But simply perusing a dictionary will give you definitions. So the definition of surge, generally by Merriam-Webster, would be to rise and fall actively, tossing a ship, surging in heavy seas, to rise and move in waves or billows. Now, also as a noun, a sudden powerful forward or upward movement, especially by a crowd or a natural force such as the waves or tide. The word insurgent, a little bit different. Merriam-Webster, insurgent as a noun would be a person who revolts against civil authority or an established government, one who acts contrary to the policies and decisions of one's own political party, actually. Or that would be one way as a noun. So, yeah, those revolting against our laws and civil authority or established government, you could say they are insurgents. Or you could say as an adjective, it would be rising in opposition to civil authority. But there's a clear difference between the word surge and insurrection. If you want to use surge to describe insurrection, you get somewhat of a pass. But when you try to say insurgency is the same thing as surge, it's not. But they're not going to care about the facts and language, believe me. What we have going on at the border, a term, if they're really looking for a definition, and I know they're not, would be crisis, chaos. The closest they came was call it a total mess, but blame it on Trump, that Trump left us a total mess. You did not have the situation we have now at the border until Biden was elected. Yeah, they were there before Trump left. Some of them were coming in, yes, because they knew Biden was going to be the next president. And there was a story just yesterday. There's another caravan right now forming in the Northern Triangle below Mexico of the countries of Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and they're already coming together, 2,000 plus that are moving forward and going to go through Mexico. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, led a group of senators down to the border the other day. And, of course, they were not allowed to have a TV crew, a network crew go with them because the Biden administration has no transparency until they tell you you can do it. And they finally let some pictures take, but believe me, they're always sanitizing what you get to see. And here I hear AOC talking about these are kids. They did the same thing, of course, when Trump was in office and the kids were in, quote, the cages, same ones, facilities that Obama had used, by the way, separating them from their parents, which is also what Obama had done for a period of time. But she was crying basically for the kids then, And now, but she has yet to go on the border, has not been down to the border. If she goes down there, you hear a description from Senator Ted Cruz, she should be appalled. Listen to this.
And the Donna facility is this giant tent city that they've built. It's massive. It's designed to hold 1,000 people, but under COVID restrictions, its capacity is 250. It right now has over 4,000 people in it. It is at a 1,500% capacity, and that meant you saw in these cages children, little boys and little girls, side by side. They're not 6 feet apart. They're not 3 feet apart. They're not even 6 inches apart. They're lying on the floor. There are no beds. They're lying on the floor side by side. They're covered with aluminum foil emergency blankets. And in that facility, the children there are testing positive for COVID at roughly a 10% rate. So they're locking them in these cages where COVID in a pandemic is a real risk. It is inhumane. It is unconscionable. And it's the direct result of the political decisions that Joe Biden has made.
So why isn't AOC calling that out? Why hasn't she been on the border posing for pictures as she did during the Trump administration? Why have no Democrats gone down there? The only Democrat I know that's gone there would be Congressman Cuellar of Texas, a Democrat. I don't know if any other Democrats have been. Well, I take it back. The White House said they sent down some staff to take a look at it. That included Alejandro Mayorkas, our Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and Susan Rice, who served in the Obama administration. But they just, I guess, came back and said, it's okay. And that was 2 weeks ago. It is escalating daily. But again, to AOC, and she doesn't want you or me to use the term that a surge is underway at the border, because in her view, you're pointing out white supremacy term and you're calling these kids basically terrorists. Listen.
This is not a surge. These are children, and they are not insurgents, and we are not being invaded, which, by the way, is a white supremacist idea, philosophy, the idea that if an other is coming in the population, that this is like an invasion of who we are.
Right. See? It's a white supremacist term. First of all, they got to pull the race card anytime they can. Well, Senator Ted Cruz says if you're that concerned, you should be, because he's actually been to the border and seen the situation. Again, Senator Cruz.
Many Democrats like to pretend their open border policies are somehow humane. There is nothing humane about what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing at the border. They're subjecting kids to horrific abuse. They're endangering their lives in a pandemic by keeping them locked up in cages right on top of each other. And then they're releasing illegal aliens into the United States who are testing positive for COVID at a rate 7 times higher than the U.S. population. This is a humanitarian crisis. It is a health crisis, and it's a national security crisis.
I would think AOC and the rest of the liberals would be down there crying out for these children. They're not. I've got a solution to this, folks. I have a solution. I'll put it in front of the Democrats and the leftists, and we'll see if they buy it. If they take my solution, this could be resolved very quickly. I mean, starting today. But before I lay that plan out, let's go back again as AOC. You heard Senator Cruz say this is a humanitarian crisis, and she wants to argue over you using the word surge. Just listen to this.
This is not a surge. These are children, and they are not insurgents, and we are not being invaded, which, by the way, is a white supremacist idea, philosophy, the idea that if an other is coming in the population, that this is like an invasion of who we are.
Yeah. And I'm looking at a report presented by townhall.com senior writer Julio Rosas, who has used and defends the term surge. He said, I'm looking at this. It's funny how AOC raced down to Texas for the winter storm, but you can't be bothered to come down now to see what's happening. And, of course, it's also funny, I would add, what she did when Trump was in place compared to what we're seeing now with the Biden administration. And a retired acting ICE director, Tom Holman, he's calling her out as well.
Well, she needs to come down and talk to the men and women to put their uniform on every day and stand in that line.
She came down when Trump was president.
Oh, absolutely, but you haven't seen her since. Look, the men and women of the Border Patrol say it's a surge. The men and women of the Border Patrol is a crisis. The men and women of the Border Patrol know, as Brian Biden said, that these cartels are using these children and family units to throw them across the border and tie up their assets. 40% of Border Patrols assigned to the facility no longer have a line. So these cartels are moving drugs and bad people to unguarded areas. This is a national security crisis. And if she can't understand that or accept that, then she shouldn't be in Congress at all.
Well, I second that. I second that immediately. Again, that's Tom Holman, retired acting ICE director. And Senator Cruz has also said it's a humanitarian disaster and crisis. It is man-made. Joe Biden caused this with political decisions made in the opening weeks of his administration. Neither Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris have been down to the border to see this crisis they created. A stunning lack of disregard. And that's true. They've not been down there. Now, simply showing up, the president showing up, does that solve everything? No, it doesn't. I pointed this out just yesterday in a discussion I had, interviewed John LeBoutier, because he immediately started attacking and said, well, what good is it going to do? The president go down. I said, John, I'm not arguing that point. But every time there's a disaster of some type, if it's a major disaster, often the president comes down. He's not changing anything by being there. There's already going to be a declaration to help the people and the state, whatever the situation is. But it just adds, I'm here. You want to contrast that to, as I mentioned yesterday, Katrina, when President Bush flew over over New Orleans after that, looking down from Air Force One, something like 10,000 feet above, something like that, whatever it was, and he got chastised. Why don't you come on the ground and see what it's looked like? Well, if it landed, then it would take security forces, it'd take police forces. Everybody had to be focusing on protecting him instead of helping the people that needed help. So that's what it does. But you don't have Biden nor Harris going down because they don't want to be involved. They already are. Biden did it with his signature, and Harris then was given an assignment by the president the other day. I'm putting you in charge of bringing this all together. And she quickly said, well, I'm just going to do the diplomatic stuff. I will talk to the diplomats. Not those people over there, not the little people. All right, Larry, you said you have a way to resolve all this. I do. Every bleeding heart liberal out there, and I have a bleeding heart for kids too, so I could go into this, but I know the difference between what they are demanding and what I think we should have. They don't care about our border. They let anyone in. We don't need to have a border. Everyone could come in, period. Those who believe that, then why don't you step up and say, I've got extra rooms in my house, or even I could turn my garage into a place to take 3-4 families. Believe me, with conditions they would have would be better than what they left. And you Hollywood elite, open up your home. When I see the major Democrats and Hollywood elite saying, bring all the illegals you can to me, I can handle maybe 100 of them at my mansion. When I start seeing them do that, then I'll believe they're serious. Then I'll believe they really care about the kids. Otherwise, they don't care about the kids. They only care about votes and to use the kids as a weapon, a pawn. It is simple and clear as that. You want to show me something? Do it. Quit your talking, step up, and do it. I'm not going to hold my breath. Coming up, CNN making an astonishing statement.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter @LarryConnorsUSA.